The transport ship docked at the Stellar Defense Academy with barely a sound. Daewon stood at the window watching the massive station stretch out before him. The structure was bigger than any city he had seen on Earth. Lights covered every surface, and ships moved in organized patterns around the docking bays. Next to him, Hyo-jin adjusted her uniform one more time. She looked calm, but Daewon could see the tension in her shoulders. They were the first human instructors at this academy. The first humans to teach warfare to species that had been fighting among the stars for thousands of years. The door opened, and a tall insectoid alien entered. Its body was covered in dark green armor, and its 4 eyes examined them without emotion. This was Commandant Threx, the leader of the academy. "Welcome to the Stellar Defense Academy," Threx said. The voice came from a translator device on its chest. "I hope you understand the opportunity you have been given." Many questioned whether humans possess the experience necessary to teach here. Daewon said nothing. He had heard similar words before, back on Earth. People always doubted until they saw results. "Your first class begins tomorrow," Threx continued. "Do not embarrass your species." The Commandant left without waiting for a response. Hyo-jin let out a slow breath. "That went well." "It will get worse before it gets better," Daewon replied. He was right. The next morning, 40 cadets filled the tactical training room. They came from a dozen different species. Some were tall and covered in fur. Others had scales or skin that changed colors. A few looked almost human, but their eyes held too much intelligence to be mistaken for his species. They all shared one thing in common. Every single one of them looked at Daewon like he did not belong there. At the front of the group sat Rax, a Valerian. His species had been warriors for 10,000 years. Their culture celebrated honor duels and ritual combat. Rax wore his achievements proudly on his uniform. Top scores in every subject. Winner of the Academy Combat Tournament 3 years running. Daewon walked to the front of the room and stood quietly. He did not introduce himself. He did not explain his background. He simply activated the holographic display and brought up a tactical scenario. "Standard assault scenario," he said. 2 forces of equal strength meet on open ground. "What do you do?" Rax stood immediately. "We advance in formation. Use our shields to close the distance. Break their line with superior discipline." "Good," Daewon said. "Now execute it." The cadets moved into the simulation chamber. They formed perfect lines and advanced with textbook precision. Their movements were coordinated and efficient. Within minutes, they had achieved a clean victory against the computer-controlled enemy. They returned to the classroom looking satisfied. Several of them exchanged glances that said the same thing. The human instructor had nothing to teach them. Daewon nodded slowly. "Now do it again. This time the enemy will not follow your rules." He changed the simulation parameters. The cadets entered the chamber again, forming the same perfect lines. They advanced with the same discipline. The enemy scattered. Some went left, others right. A few retreated into cover. The cadets hesitated, unsure which direction to pursue. Their formation broke apart as different groups chased different targets. Hidden enemy units appeared from unexpected positions. They hit the cadets from the sides and rear. What should have been an equal fight turned into chaos. The cadets lost badly. Back in the classroom, the cadets looked confused and frustrated. Rax's face showed barely controlled anger. "You changed the scenario," Rax said. "That was not the same test." "The enemy always changes the scenario," Daewon replied calmly. "They will not fight the way you want them to fight. They will do whatever gives them the best chance to win." "That is not honorable combat," another cadet said. "Honor does not win wars. Survival wins wars." The classroom fell silent. The cadets stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. In the cultures of the Galactic Union, warfare followed rules. Battles happened in designated spaces. Both sides agreed on terms before fighting began. Daewon could see that these cadets had never faced a truly desperate enemy. They had trained for war, but they had never experienced it. "On Earth," Daewon said quietly, "we have a saying, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Your formations are perfect. Your discipline is excellent. But the moment something unexpected happens, you freeze. Real warfare is not about executing the perfect plan. It is about adapting when every plan fails." Rax stood up. "You insult our training. You insult our traditions. How can someone from a planet that only discovered space travel a few years ago teach species that have been fighting among the stars for millennia?" The other cadets murmured in agreement. Some nodded. Others crossed their arms and glared at the human instructor. Daewon met Rax's eyes and spoke with quiet certainty. Because Earth never stopped fighting. While your species learned to wage war between the stars, humans were killing each other on their own planet. We have been at war for our entire history. Every generation, every nation, every group. We fought with stones and clubs. Then we fought with swords and arrows. Then guns and bombs. We built weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. He paused and looked around the room. You practice war. We lived it. Every day for thousands of years. So yes, you may have more experience fighting in space, but we have more experience fighting to survive. The cadets did not know how to respond. Some looked thoughtful. Others remained angry. But none of them could argue with the conviction in Daewon's voice. Class ended in tense silence. As the cadets filed out, Daewon heard them whispering. Some spoke of filing complaints. Others mocked his teaching methods. A few wondered if what he said about Earth was true. That evening, Daewon found Hyo-jin in the instructor quarters. She looked exhausted. How was your first day? He asked. They think combat medicine means staying safely behind the front line, she said. None of them can imagine treating wounded soldiers while being shot at. They have dedicated medics and dedicated fighters, but nobody who can do both. Daewon sat down heavily. They think war is something clean and organized, something with rules that both sides follow. Maybe that is how war should be, Hyo-jin said softly. Maybe. But it is not how war is. In the cadet dormitories, Rax sat with a group of his fellow students. They were drafting a formal complaint to Commandant Threx. The human instructors were unqualified. Their methods were inappropriate. Their attitudes were disrespectful. 30 cadets signed the document. They submitted it that night, confident that the academy leadership would remove the humans and restore proper instruction. Commandant Threx read the complaint in the quiet of the command office. The insectoid's 4 eyes scanned the words without emotion. Part of Threx agreed with the cadets. The humans were arrogant. They dismissed traditions that had existed for thousands of years. But another part of Threx remembered something. The Galactic Union had not fought a truly desperate war in centuries. Their conflicts were organized, controlled, civilized. What would happen if they faced an enemy who did not care about civilization? An enemy who fought with the desperation of a cornered animal? Threx set the complaint aside and opened a file on human history. The Commandant began to read, and with each page a disturbing picture emerged. The humans were not exaggerating. If anything, they were understating the violence of their past. Perhaps, Threx thought, the cadets needed to learn what the humans had to teach, even if they did not want to hear it. 2 weeks passed, and the human instructors remained at the academy. Commandant Threx had rejected the cadets' complaint. The decision shocked everyone, but Threx gave no explanation. The humans would continue teaching, and the cadets would continue learning. Daewon's tactical classes grew more challenging each day. He introduced scenarios where the enemy had better weapons, more soldiers, and superior positions. The cadets failed repeatedly. They had been trained to fight equals, not to overcome disadvantages. But slowly some of them started to understand. They began asking questions instead of making complaints. How do you fight an enemy with better technology? How do you win when outnumbered? How do you adapt when your plans fail? Daewon answered each question with examples from human history. He told them about small groups of soldiers defeating entire armies through clever tactics. He described battles won by tricking the enemy into making mistakes. He explained how terrain, weather, and timing could matter more than numbers or weapons. Meanwhile, Hyo-jin's combat medicine class reached a critical moment. She had scheduled a special simulation, and every cadet in the academy knew about it. They gathered in the training chamber, curious to see what the human instructor had planned. Hyo-jin stood before them with her usual calm expression. Today's exercise is simple. You will complete a combat mission while providing medical care to wounded teammates. Half of you will be soldiers. The other half will be medics. But here's the difference. When a soldier gets wounded, they become a medic. When a medic gets wounded, they become a soldier. Everyone must be able to do both. The cadets exchanged confused glances. In the Galactic Union military, roles were clearly defined. Medics stayed in safe areas and treated the wounded. Soldiers fought on the front lines. The two jobs never mixed. Pyrrha, an amphibian cadet and one of Rax's closest friends, raised her hand. Instructor, this goes against all standard military doctrine. Soldiers are not trained for medical procedures. Medics are not trained for combat. On Earth, every soldier receives medical training, Hyojin replied, because in real combat the medic might be dead or trapped somewhere else. If you cannot treat your own wounds or help your teammates, you will die waiting for help that never comes. The simulation began. The cadets advanced through a hostile area, moving toward their objective. Everything seemed routine at first. Then the enemy attacked with overwhelming force. The first cadet fell wounded within seconds. The medics rushed forward to help, but enemy fire forced them back into cover. The wounded soldier lay in the open, bleeding. The combat soldiers continued fighting, trying to suppress the enemy, but none of them knew how to treat the wound. Minutes passed. The wounded soldier's vital signs dropped in the simulation. Finally, one of the medics made it to the casualty, but by then it was too late. The simulated soldier died from injuries that could have been treated. The exercise continued, growing worse with each minute. More cadets fell wounded. The medics could not reach them because of enemy fire. The soldiers could not help because they lacked medical knowledge. The mission failed completely, and half the team suffered fatal injuries in the simulation. In the debriefing room, the cadets sat in stunned silence. They had never experienced such a devastating failure. Rax stared at his hands, replaying the moment when his teammate bled out right next to him, while he helplessly returned fire at the enemy. Hyojin spoke quietly. This happens in real combat. You will not always have a medic nearby. You will not always have time to wait for medical evacuation. Sometimes the only person who can save your life is the soldier fighting next to you. She activated a display showing images from Earth's conflicts. The cadets saw human soldiers treating each other's wounds in the middle of firefights. They saw medics carrying weapons and fighting while dragging wounded teammates to safety. They saw individuals performing complex medical procedures with bullets flying overhead. On Earth, we learned that survival requires versatility, Hyojin continued. A soldier must be able to fight, heal, communicate, navigate, and lead. Because war does not care about your specialty. It only cares about whether you can adapt. One cadet, a tall, furred creature from a northern world, spoke up. But how do you train someone to master so many skills? It takes years to become a qualified medic. It takes years to become a skilled warrior. You do not need to master everything, Hyojin explained. You need to be competent enough to survive until an expert arrives. On Earth, we teach every soldier how to stop bleeding, treat shock, and stabilize fractures. We teach every medic how to shoot, take cover, and call for support. It is not about perfection. It is about not dying from something preventable. The words hung in the air. The cadets had been raised in a galaxy where military roles were rigid and specialized. The idea that everyone should know a little of everything seemed inefficient. But after experiencing the simulation, they could not deny its value. That evening, a group of cadets gathered in one of the study rooms. Rax, Pyrrha, and 6 others sat around a table, reviewing human military history files that Daewon had made available. They read about battles where small human forces defeated larger armies through deception and misdirection. They studied defensive sieges where outnumbered humans held positions for months against overwhelming odds. They examined guerrilla campaigns where poorly equipped fighters brought down powerful military forces. Pyrrha looked up from her reading. Every single one of these battles had humans fighting at a disadvantage. Better weapons against them, more enemies against them, worse positions, less supplies. How did they keep winning? Rax thought about it for a long moment. Because they had no choice. Look at their planet. Earth is what the Union classifies as a death world. The environment itself tries to kill you. Hostile weather, dangerous animals, deadly diseases. Humans evolved in a place where every day was a fight for survival. And then they fought each other for thousands of years, another cadet added. While we were building interstellar civilizations and establishing trade networks, humans were perfecting the art of killing each other with increasingly terrible weapons. The group fell silent. It was a disturbing realization. The Galactic Union had achieved peace through cooperation and mutual benefit. But humans had achieved victory through constant conflict and adaptation. Rax closed the file he had been reading. I challenged Instructor Daewon on the first day. I asked how someone from a primitive planet could teach us about warfare. Now I understand. We know how to wage war in space. But they know how to win wars they should lose. Far above the training areas, Commandant Threck stood in the command center. reviewing reports from across the Galactic Union. Recent conflicts showed troubling patterns. Union forces won battles through superior technology and numbers, but they took heavy casualties when enemies used unconventional tactics. A pirate group had held off a Union battleship for 3 days, using improvised weapons and creative positioning. A planetary rebellion had scattered Union ground forces by refusing to fight pitched battles. A border skirmish had turned into a costly stalemate when the enemy abandoned formal military structures. Threx realized something uncomfortable. The Union military had grown too dependent on fighting civilized opponents who followed established rules. They had forgotten how to fight enemies who were desperate, creative, and willing to do anything to win. The insectoid's 4 eyes turned toward the human instructor quarters. The humans knew these lessons because they had lived them. Every tactic they taught came from actual experience, paid for with real blood across thousands of years. Perhaps, Threx thought, the humans were not here to learn from the Union. Perhaps the Union was here to learn from them. The next morning, Day-Wan arrived early to prepare his classroom. He found a dozen cadets already waiting, including Rax. They stood when he entered, showing respect they had not given before. Rax stepped forward. "Instructor, we want to learn. Teach us how humans fight. Teach us how to win when everything is against us." Day-Wan looked at the young warrior and saw something that had not been there before. Humility, the willingness to learn, the understanding that they did not know everything. "Sit down," Day-Wan said simply. "We have a lot of work to do." The announcement came during morning assembly. Commandant Threx stood on the elevated platform, looking down at hundreds of cadets and instructors gathered in the main hall. "The annual war games will begin in 3 days," Threx declared. "This year we will have a special scenario. The human instructors will lead the opposition force." Excited whispers spread through the crowd. The war games were the Academy's most important exercise. Senior cadets faced off against junior instructors in complex simulations. The instructors always won, demonstrating their superior experience and skill. Threx continued. "However, there will be conditions. The opposition force will have half as many soldiers as the cadet force. They will have inferior weapons and equipment. They must defend a position that tactical analysis shows is indefensible." Rax glanced at Pyrrha. Both of them understood what this meant. Commandant Threx was giving the humans an impossible scenario. Either the Commandant wanted to prove the humans were not as skilled as they claimed, or Threx genuinely wanted to see what the humans could do under pressure. Instructor Kale, a senior avian tactical instructor, approached Day-Wan after the assembly. Her feathers rustled with what seemed like amusement. "I hope you understand what you are facing," Kyle said. "The cadet force will have superior numbers, better weapons, air support, and complete intelligence on your position. You will be defending a valley with no cover and no escape routes. This scenario was designed to be unwinnable." Day-Wan smiled slightly. Every battle Earth ever fought was supposed to be unwinnable for someone. Usually for us. Kale's head tilted in that curious bird-like way. "I will be watching with great interest. If nothing else, this should be educational for the cadets." 3 days later, the war games began. The cadet force, led by Rax and Pyrrha, assembled at their starting position. They had 80 soldiers, advanced weapons, and air support drones. Their objective was simple: advance into the valley and capture the enemy position within 48 hours. Rax reviewed the tactical data one more time. The opposition force had 40 soldiers with basic weapons. Intelligence showed they were positioned at the valley's end, exactly where the terrain offered the least protection. The cadets had every advantage. This should be easy. The cadet force moved forward confidently. Their formation was perfect. Their communication was crisp and efficient. Air support drones flew overhead, scanning for enemy positions. They reached the valley and found it empty. The defensive position was abandoned. The humans were gone. Pyrrha checked the scanner data. Nothing. No heat signatures, no movement, no communications. They just left, Rax frowned. Abandoning the defensive position made no sense. Where could the humans go? The valley had only one entrance, and the cadets controlled it. The surrounding terrain was rough and difficult to cross. They must be hiding somewhere in the valley, Rax decided. Split into 4 teams. Search every cave, every rock formation, every possible hiding spot. The cadet force spread out and began searching. Hours passed. They found nothing. No enemies, no equipment, no signs that anyone had ever been there. Then the first team reported a problem. Their supply depot had been sabotaged. Food supplies contaminated. Ammunition scattered. Communication equipment destroyed. Before Rax could respond, a second report came in. One of the air support drones had been shot down. A third report followed. Another team had been ambushed. 3 cadets eliminated from the simulation. The humans were not hiding in the valley. They had left and circled around behind the cadet force. Now they were attacking from unexpected directions, hitting supply lines and isolated teams. Rax ordered the teams to regroup, but it was too late. The human force had split into small groups. They struck quickly and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Every time the cadets tried to corner them, they found only empty terrain and booby traps. The first day ended badly for the cadets. They had lost a quarter of their force and most of their supplies. The humans had suffered only 2 casualties. In the observation center, Instructor Kale watched the tactical display with growing disbelief. The humans were not defending anything. They were moving constantly, attacking targets of opportunity and avoiding direct confrontation with the main cadet force. Commandant Threx stood beside her. "This is not standard Union military doctrine." "No," Kyle agreed. "This is something else entirely. They are fighting like prey animals with teeth." The second day was worse. The cadets tried to establish secure positions, but the humans attacked their supply lines relentlessly. Air support became useless because the humans had learned to use the terrain to hide from aerial surveillance. Every time the cadets sent out a patrol, it got ambushed. Pyrrha reviewed the casualty reports with increasing frustration. "We still have more soldiers than they do. We still have better weapons, but we cannot find them. And when we do find them, they disappear before we can engage properly." Rax stared at the tactical map. The humans had turned the entire battlefield into a trap. Every movement the cadets made seemed to play into the enemy's hands. Every decision led to more casualties. "They are not trying to win through superior force," Rax said slowly. "They are trying to break our will to fight." He was right. By the third day, the cadet force was exhausted and demoralized. They jumped at shadows. They wasted ammunition shooting at false targets. They argued about strategy and blamed each other for failures. Meanwhile, the human force maintained perfect discipline. They moved like ghosts through the terrain. They struck with precision and vanished without a trace. They used every advantage the landscape offered, turning rocks and caves into fortified positions that appeared and disappeared as needed. On the final day, Day 1 gathered his team for one last operation. They had reduced the cadet force to barely 40 effective soldiers. Now it was time to end the exercise. Hyojin checked her weapon. The command center is protected by their last coherent unit. About 15 cadets, well-positioned, alert, and ready. "We do not attack it," Day 1 replied. "We make them abandon it." The humans created a diversion on the opposite side of the cadet camp. Explosions and simulated gunfire erupted. It looked like a major assault. Rax, desperate to finally engage the enemy in direct combat, led most of his remaining forces toward the sound. While the cadets rushed to defend against an attack that was mostly smoke and noise, Day 1 led a small team directly into the now lightly defended command center. They eliminated the few guards, captured Rax when he returned, and secured the position. The war games ended with a result that shocked everyone. The inferior force defending an indefensible position had achieved total victory. The casualty ratio was 10-1 in favor of the humans. In the debriefing room, Rax sat in stunned silence. Pyrrha sat beside him, equally shaken. The other cadets wore similar expressions of disbelief and humiliation. Day 1 stood at the front of the room. He did not gloat. He did not mock. He simply explained what had happened. "You fought the battle you were trained to fight," he said. "You used superior numbers and better equipment to overwhelm a defensive position. That works when the enemy stands still and lets you do it. But we did not stand still. We refused to fight on your terms." He activated the display, showing the movement patterns of both forces. "You focused on the objective. We focused on survival. You tried to win. We tried not to lose. And in a battle between someone trying to win and someone trying not to lose, the survivor usually wins eventually." Pyrrha raised her hand. "But this is not how real warfare works. In actual combat, both sides have objectives. Both sides have things they must defend or capture." "True," Hyojin said from her position beside Day 1. But the weaker side can often choose not to defend fixed positions. They can choose to make the enemy spread out, chase shadows, and exhaust themselves. This is called asymmetric warfare. The strong fight directly, the weak fight indirectly. Rax looked up, his face showing a mixture of emotions: anger, respect, confusion, and something that might have been fear. On Earth, Rax said slowly, you fought like this all the time. Not just sometimes. Not just in special circumstances. This is how humans fight wars, Day One nodded. When you fight enemies who are stronger, better armed, and more numerous, you cannot beat them at their own game. You must change the game entirely. Instructor Kale entered the room. She looked at Day One with newfound respect. I have been teaching tactical warfare for 20 years. I have never seen anything like what you did in these war games. That is because you have been teaching how to win wars between equals, Day One replied. We teach how to win wars you should lose. The room fell silent. Every cadet understood now. The humans were not better warriors because of special abilities or superior training. They were better because they had spent thousands of years learning how to win impossible fights. That night, Rax could not sleep. He kept replaying the war games in his mind. Every decision he had made seemed logical at the time. Every tactic he used was from the Academy textbooks. But the humans had anticipated it all and turned his strengths into weaknesses. He finally understood what Day One had tried to teach them from the first day. War was not about following rules or executing perfect plans. War was about adapting, surviving, and doing whatever it took to win. The Academy changed after the war games. Cadets who had mocked the human instructors now sought their guidance. Classes that were once half empty now had waiting lists. The humans had proven themselves in a way that words never could. But Rax found himself struggling with something deeper than tactics or strategy. 3 weeks after the war games, he could not shake a growing unease. He had learned how to fight like a human. Now he wondered why humans fought that way. Late one evening, he went to the observation deck. The massive windows offered a view of the stars, and on clear days you could see Earth as a small blue point in the distance. Day One was already there, standing alone and staring at his home planet. Rax approached quietly. May I ask you something? Rax said. The human instructor nodded without looking away from Earth. How did humans become so good at this? Rax asked. Not just tactics. The way you think about warfare, the way you approach impossible situations. Where did it come from? Day One was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and heavy. You want the truth? We are good at war because we never stopped doing it. Your species achieved space travel and found other civilizations to trade with, to learn from, to cooperate with. My species achieved space travel and we were still fighting each other. He turned to face Rax. Earth has never been unified. Not truly. Even now we have over 200 nations. For most of our history, those nations were at war. When they were not fighting each other, they were fighting civil wars inside their own borders. We have been killing each other for so long that we do not remember when it started. Rax felt something cold settle in his chest. But the Galactic Union has records of Earth. We know you had conflicts, but surely not constant warfare. Look up human military history, Day One said. Really look at it. In the last 100 years alone, Earth had 2 wars that killed millions. Before that, we had centuries of colonial wars, religious wars, territorial wars. We built weapons specifically designed to kill as many people as possible. We invented poison gas, firebombs, and nuclear weapons. We turned entire cities into graves. The young Valerian warrior had studied some human history, but hearing it stated so plainly made it feel different, more real, more horrible. The tactics I teach, Day One continued, they come from desperate people trying to survive. Guerrilla warfare was invented by farmers fighting professional armies. Asymmetric tactics came from rebels fighting governments with tanks and aircraft. Every trick, every strategy, every lesson was paid for with blood. He looked back at Earth. Your people fight to achieve objectives, political goals, territorial disputes, resource conflicts. But when you achieve your goal or realize you cannot win, you stop fighting. You negotiate. You find another way. Humans fought total wars. Wars where losing meant your nation ceased to exist. Your culture was destroyed. Your people were enslaved or exterminated. We fought with the understanding that surrender was not an option. That kind of desperation makes you very creative. Rax sat down heavily on one of the observation benches. He had always thought of his species as warriors. The Valerians had 10,000 years of military tradition. But that tradition was built on ritual combat and honorable duels. The idea of fighting with the desperation Daewon described was foreign to everything he knew. I read about some of your wars, Rax said quietly. The one you call World War II, 60 million dead. How do you live with that knowledge? How do you teach warfare when you know what it really costs? Daewon looked at the young cadet with eyes that held too much sadness. You live with it by making sure the next generation understands it. You teach them to be good at war so that maybe, just maybe, they can end wars quickly instead of letting them drag on. You show them what real combat costs so they never start one without good reason. Across the academy, Hyojin was having a similar conversation with Pyrrha and several other cadets. They had come to her with questions about human combat medicine, but the discussion had gone deeper. Instructor, Pyrrha said, you mentioned once that you worked in a field hospital during a human conflict. Can you tell us about it? Hyojin set down the medical equipment she had been organizing. I served in 3 conflict zones. The last one was in a desert region. We treated casualties from both sides because the fighting was so intense that wounded soldiers from different armies ended up at the same medical facilities. She pulled up images on her data pad. The cadets looked at pictures of makeshift hospitals, of doctors working in tents with limited supplies, of soldiers missing limbs or covered in burns. I performed 30-hour shifts, Hyojin continued. We ran out of proper anesthesia, so we used whatever we had. We ran out of clean bandages, so we sterilized and reused them. I did surgery by flashlight when the generators failed. I held soldiers while they died because we could not save them. One of the cadets, a young insectoid student, spoke up. But human medical technology is advanced. How could you lack basic supplies? Because war destroys everything, Hyojin replied. Supply lines get cut, equipment gets damaged, people hoard resources. The ideal situation you train for in medical school never happens in actual combat. You make do with what you have and you save who you can. Pyrrha looked at the images with growing horror. These soldiers are so young. Some of them look barely older than us. War does not care about age, Hyojin said softly. That is why I teach you to be competent in combat medicine. Not because I think you will face this. I pray you never do. But if you do face it, I want you to be ready. I want you to save lives instead of watching helplessly while people die. The classroom fell into heavy silence. The cadets had come seeking knowledge about human techniques. They left understanding the price humans had paid to develop those techniques. Over the following days, word spread through the academy. The cadets began researching human history in earnest. What they found disturbed them deeply. Earth's wars were not isolated incidents. They were constant. Decade after decade, century after century, humans had fought and died in conflicts large and small. The technology changed, but the violence never stopped. They found records of sieges that lasted years, battles where entire armies were destroyed in a single day, campaigns where disease killed more soldiers than combat, weapons specifically designed to cause maximum suffering. They discovered that human languages had dozens of words for different types of warfare. That human literature was filled with stories about war. That human children played games simulating combat. Instructor Kale brought her concerns to Commandant Threx. The avian instructor perched on the edge of a chair in the Commandant's office. Her feathers ruffled with agitation. The cadets are troubled, Kale said. They are learning human tactics, but they are also learning about the context that created those tactics. Some of them are questioning whether we should be studying this at all. Threx's 4 eyes studied the reports on the desk. The humans are not teaching the cadets to be violent. They are teaching them to understand violence. There is a difference, but at what cost? Kale pressed. The human instructors carry visible trauma. They teach lessons paid for with real suffering. Is this the kind of knowledge we want in our military? The commandant was quiet for a long moment. Look at our recent conflicts. Pirates who should surrender instead fight to the death. Rebellions that should negotiate instead wage guerrilla campaigns. Enemies who should follow military conventions instead use terror tactics. The galaxy is changing, Kale. Our enemies are no longer civilized opponents who follow our rules. Threx stood and walked to the window. The humans understand how to fight uncivilized warfare because they lived through it. If we do not learn from them, we will keep losing soldiers to enemies who do not care about our traditions and conventions. Back in his quarters, Rax sat with a collection of human historical texts. He had been reading for hours. The more he learned, the more he understood why Daiwan carried such weight in his eyes. Humans had not just studied war. They had perfected it through thousands of years of practice. Every tactic in the Academy textbooks had a human equivalent that was more refined, more ruthless, more effective. But the texts also showed something else. Humans mourned their wars. They built monuments to the dead. They wrote poetry about the cost of victory. They created entire philosophical traditions around the morality of violence. The humans were not monsters who loved war. They were survivors who hated it, but had become terrifyingly good at it because they had no other choice. Rax closed the book and looked up at the ceiling. He had wanted to learn how to fight like a human. Now he understood what that really meant. It meant learning tactics born from desperation, strategies forged in suffering, knowledge paid for with countless lives. The young warrior felt the weight of that knowledge settle on his shoulders. The humans had given the Academy an incredible gift, but it came with a terrible understanding. War was not glorious or honorable. It was brutal, desperate, and soul-crushing. The emergency alarm shattered the quiet morning at the Academy. Cadets rushed from their quarters as the announcement echoed through every corridor. All senior cadets and instructors report to the main briefing hall immediately. This is not a drill. Rax met Pyrrha in the hallway, both of them pulling on their uniforms as they ran. Real emergencies were rare at the Academy. Something serious must have happened. The briefing hall filled quickly. Commandant Threx stood at the center platform, looking more agitated than Rax had ever seen. Beside Threx stood a tall reptilian officer wearing the uniform of a Union fleet admiral. Threx spoke without preamble. 3 hours ago, a rogue militant group seized control of the Kepler border station. They have taken 200 civilian hostages. Admiral Voss has his fleet surrounding the station, but the situation is complicated. Admiral Voss stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the station and the surrounding area. The station is located in a dense asteroid field. Any direct assault would be detected immediately, giving the militants time to harm the hostages. They have fortified the main entrances and have weapons capable of destroying approaching ships. The Admiral's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of stress. Union Tactical Command has been working on a solution for the past 3 hours. We have found no acceptable way to resolve this without massive casualties. Threx turned to the assembled group. I am deploying a team of senior cadets as observers. They will accompany the human instructors to Admiral Voss's flagship. This will be a learning experience. The Commandant's eyes found Day One in the crowd. However, I am also authorizing the human instructors to provide tactical consultation. The Admiral has agreed to consider any suggestions they might offer. 2 hours later, Rax found himself aboard the flagship alongside Pyrrha and 6 other senior cadets. The bridge was a flurry of activity. Officers studied sensor data and tactical displays while Admiral Voss coordinated with his fleet. Daewon and Hyojin stood to one side, reviewing the same data. The human instructor said nothing, simply observing and making notes. Admiral Voss noticed their silence. Well, do the famous human instructors have nothing to offer? My tactical officers have found no solution. Perhaps this situation is beyond even Earth's experience. There was a challenge in the Admiral's voice. Daewon understood. The military leaders of the Union had heard about the war games. Some were impressed. Others, like Voss, seemed to view the humans as overrated newcomers. May I see all reconnaissance data? Daewon asked quietly. Station schematics, asteroid field composition, enemy behavior patterns, everything you have. Voss gestured impatiently. Show him. For the next 3 hours, Daewon studied every piece of information available. Hyojin joined him, examining the medical facilities on the station and the composition of the hostages. The cadets watched in fascination as the human instructors worked in complete silence, occasionally exchanging brief comments that the others could not quite hear. Admiral Voss grew more impatient with each passing hour. We do not have unlimited time. The militants have issued demands. If we do not respond within 12 hours, they will start executing hostages. Daewon finally looked up from the displays. I have a plan. You will not like it. The Admiral's scales darkened. Speak. A small team infiltrates through the asteroid field using minimal equipment, Daewon explained. We approach the station from an unexpected angle and enter through an abandoned mining tunnel on the lower levels. The tunnel is unstable and considered too dangerous for use, which is why the militants have not guarded it. He brought up a detailed schematic. Once inside, the team moves through maintenance corridors to reach the hostages. We neutralize the militants quietly, section by section, before they realize we are there. Admiral Voss stared at the plan in disbelief. That mining tunnel collapsed partially last year. The structure is unstable. Any vibration could cause a complete collapse. And you propose taking a team through it? Yes. And your plan requires moving through maintenance corridors barely wide enough for one person. If discovered, there is no room to fight or retreat. Correct, the Admiral's voice rose. This is not a plan. This is suicide. You want to risk lives on something that violates every safety protocol and tactical doctrine. Daewon met the Admiral's eyes calmly. It is the only plan that might work. Your doctrine says the situation is impossible. I am offering you a way to solve the impossible. I will lead the team myself, Daewon continued. Instructor Hyojin will provide medical support. We need 6 more volunteers who are willing to accept the risk. Before Voss could respond, Rax stepped forward. I volunteer. Pyrrha moved beside him. I volunteer as well. 4 more cadets joined them. All of them had been in Daewon's classes. All of them had learned to think like humans, to see possibilities where doctrine saw only impossibilities. Admiral Voss looked at Commandant Threx, who had been observing silently. You approve this madness? Threx's 4 eyes studied Daewon for a long moment. I approve. If the humans say this can work, I believe them. The preparation took 2 more hours. The team equipped themselves with minimal gear. Heavy weapons and armor would not fit through the maintenance corridors. They would carry only light arms and basic survival equipment. As they prepared to depart, Hyojin pulled the cadets aside. Listen carefully. What we are about to do is dangerous in ways you cannot fully understand. If the tunnel collapses, we die. If we are discovered, we die. If anything goes wrong, we probably die. I need you to understand that and accept it. Pyrrha spoke for the group. We understand, Instructor. We chose this. The infiltration began. The team launched from the flagship in a small, stealthy transport. They navigated through the asteroid field, moving slowly to avoid detection. Twice they had to hide behind asteroids as militant patrol ships passed nearby. They reached the station's lower levels and found the collapsed mining tunnel. It looked even worse in person. Debris blocked half the passage, and the walls showed stress fractures that could give way at any moment. Daewon entered first, moving carefully to avoid disturbing loose material. The others followed in single file. Every step had to be precise. Every breath had to be controlled. One mistake could trigger a collapse that would kill them all. Rax had trained for many things, but nothing prepared him for the feeling of crawling through an unstable tunnel in near-total darkness. He could hear the structure groaning around them. Small pieces of debris fell constantly. At one point, the cadet ahead of him stopped moving, frozen in fear. Daewon's voice came through the communication device, quiet, but firm. Keep moving. Fear is normal. Stopping is death. One step at a time, they kept moving. Somehow, impossibly, they made it through the tunnel without triggering a collapse. The team emerged into a maintenance corridor, shaking but alive. Now came the more dangerous part. Moving through the station without being detected, Daewon led them through passages too small for most of the militants to use. They moved silently, communicating only with hand signals. When they encountered a guard, they eliminated the threat without raising an alarm. Rax watched Daewon work and understood something profound. This was not luck or recklessness. Every move the human made was calculated. Every risk was measured against potential gain. Daewon had done this before in real combat, where mistakes meant death. They reached the section where the hostages were held. 20 militants guarded the area, heavily armed and positioned to prevent any conventional rescue attempt. Daewon did not attack directly. Instead, he created a diversion in a different section of the station. Simulated alarms and fake sensor readings suggested that Union forces were attempting a frontal assault. Most of the militants rushed to defend against the phantom attack. The remaining guards stayed at the hostage location, but they were distracted, watching the passages for the expected assault. The team approached from above, through ceiling access panels that the militants had never considered. Within 60 seconds, they had neutralized the remaining guards and secured the hostages. Hyojin immediately began treating injured hostages while Daewon coordinated with the fleet. Union forces moved in to secure the station now that the hostages were safe. Back on the flagship, Admiral Voss stood in stunned silence as reports came in. The mission that his best tactical officers had deemed impossible was complete. No hostages killed, minimal team casualties. The militants neutralized. When the team returned to the flagship, Voss approached Day One. The Admiral's scales had shifted to a pale blue, indicating respect and humility. "I was wrong about you," Voss said simply. "About all of you. Union forces have grown too comfortable. We expect warfare to follow rules and conventions. You showed us that sometimes survival requires breaking every rule." Day One nodded. "The enemy does not care about your rules. They only care about winning. If you limit yourself to doctrine, you limit your ability to respond to threats." 3 months later, Rax stood in the Academy's graduation hall. He wore the uniform of a Union officer now, preparing for his first real assignment. Around him, his fellow graduates did the same. Commandant Threx addressed the graduating class. "You are the first generation to learn from both Union tradition and human experience. You understand warfare as both an art and a science.